Hello, my name is Ethan Hewlin. Like you, I live in a world that never stops moving. Also like you, I have stories. These are my stories. The true stories of a tryhard. Welcome back to True Stories of a Tryhard. I am Ethan Hewlin, and this week it is just me and you, the listener. This episode is going to come with a very personal place, as it is most of the time with the episodes where it's just me, though I do get personal with my guests as well. So let's get to something that, if you've listened to the show for a while, you're somewhat familiar with. I like to be in control. Not necessarily that I'm a control freak, though maybe I am, who knows. But I like things to be a certain way. I like routine, I like consistency, I like things that can be dependable. And when things aren't dependable, that messes with me. It is this sort of shake-up that causes more depressive episodes for me. And something that's recently kind of pressed those buttons is the fact that I haven't been doing as well as I have expected for myself in the past at school. Now, as I have said before, on this show, I have very high expectations of myself. And when those expectations are not met, I get anxious because I'm wondering what I do wrong, what's wrong with me, and what can I do to fix it as quickly as possible. Well, there may not be anything necessarily wrong with me. What I did wrong might be stupid, and I may not be able to fix it quickly. And that's what really bothers me, is that just because of the personality that I have, I want things to be fixed as quickly as possible so things can return to some sense of normalcy. So you can only imagine what this pandemic has been like for me. In a word, hell. It's been hell. But I've kind of come to a point where I've accepted that it's being fixed and progress is being made, just not as quickly as I would like. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. But I say all of that to get to the topic of this week's episode. What it boils down to, in my case anyway, is perfectionism, which in this context is just a standard for oneself that if anything is less than perfect, it is a failure. And this can show itself in several ways. First and foremost being what is called all or nothing thinking, which is kind of self-explanatory. It's either perfect or it's not. You're also highly critical of yourself, where you focus on whatever imperfections or what went wrong, as opposed to what you did well or the good things that happened. If you're like me and you have anxiety, fear is a big motivator for you, which can be good, but it can also be really, really bad when taken too far. As my mom likes to say, every strength when pushed too far is a weakness. You set unrealistic standards for yourself, hence being perfect. You're result focused. You like lists and checking boxes off, and yes, I know I'm calling myself out. That's kind of the point of this whole thing. You get depressed when goals aren't met and you're not doing as well as you want. You have a really unhealthy fear of failure. You procrastinate, you get defensive, and you have low self-esteem. Now, I said all those things partially to call myself out, and partially so that you, listener, can have a better idea of what we're looking at here. Because these traits of someone who is perfectionist-minded they're either familiar to you, they're not familiar to you, or they're familiar to somebody that you know. And I want to address it for, yes, myself, but also for you. Because when these unrealistic standards are set, either you set them yourself or someone else sets them for you, that can lead to a mindset that is a perfectionist mindset, where results are more important than process. And though you may achieve the result that you want in the end, how you got there, though you may not think it matters, it does. Because if someone asks you to do it again, and you can't, that's not good. But that's neither here nor there. So, how does it affect our mental health? Those of us who do lean that way. Well, in the most extreme cases, it can be fatal. Here's what I mean. And for anyone who is triggered by suicide, this is your warning. There was a study done in 2013 around suicide in young people. And it found that 70% of young people who died by suicide, and what they define as young is 12 to 25, have their reason for taking their own lives being that their loved ones were perfectionists, and they created an environment where having exceedingly high expectations of yourself was the norm. And within that age group of young people, there are graduate students and undergraduate students. And it found that 30% of undergraduate students experience some sort of depression that is correlated with these perfectionist ideals. And it's only getting worse because the proportion of people who exhibit these perfectionist traits has risen by 33% over the past 40 years. May not sound like a lot, but considering that there were 40,000 students in this study, that's quite a bit. Hey tryhards, Ethan here. I want to talk to you guys about Patreon. Patreon is a donation service, a monthly subscription service where you donate money to me to support the show, to support the growth of it, whether that means merchandise or more podcasts or other things of that nature. And I would really appreciate if you guys will be willing and able to give just a little bit of whatever extra money you may have. Because while the show will always be free for everyone to listen, the way to make it isn't. And I'm in college, and things are expensive. So I'd appreciate any little amount that you're able to give. So thank you for donating, and thank you even more for listening. And the butterfly effect from this perfectionist mindset leads to clinical depression, eating disorders, and premature death in that demographic, of which I am a part. And as I've said before, mental health and physical health are not separate entities. What's going on in your brain affects your body. And perfectionism, at the very least, can lead to high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease, even diabetes and Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, or a heart attack. All of these caused by chronic stress that perfectionism brings. And that's what it does. It creates stress by occupying your brain space, as I've previously established, and also just on loop, over and over and over again. Now, what causes all that? Well, what really what is the most constant source of these perfectionist ideals is the inner voice. It's something everybody has, at least from what I understand. But a perfectionist inner voice is pretty hard on them. It's kind of it's like a nagging parent or boss or something along those lines, talking to you as if you are a child, telling you that you're not good enough no matter how hard you try and how much you do, and it just never shuts up, no matter what you do. It doesn't shut up. It's always in your head, telling you exactly what you did wrong, and that there's nothing you can do to fix it, and that you're a failure, and that you can't come back from it. And that's a lot of what I've been hearing in my own head lately. Because, as I've said elsewhere, a lot of my identity when I was younger was tied to how well I could do at school. Because I wasn't athletic, so I put all of my effort into being the smartest kid in the room. And I worked my butt off, and I got good grades, and I got comfortable. I didn't need to try in some classes. So I challenged myself. But when I did, the classes that I wasn't doing as well in, I was confused, because I didn't understand why I wasn't doing as well in them, without fully realizing that the reason I took those was because those other ones were too easy, and that I was doing this because they weren't hard enough for me. And so I worked hard again, and I changed my habits, and I was able to do better. But then I went to community college, where it was basically like stepping into the regular class in high school as opposed to the advanced placement classes that I had been taking. I didn't have to try as hard. And now that I'm at a four-year university, things are a lot harder. And that has caused my grades to slip because I've gotten rusty. Those habits that I picked up in high school because I needed to do better, they just haven't been used. And because I had a certain expectation of what college would be like, and that expectation is being met, I'm confused, I'm depressed, and sometimes I just feel helpless. But I say all of that to say that there is something that can be done. And that's really all I want to say at the end of the day, is that it can be done. It can be taught to either quiet that inner voice or talk back to it. Here's what I mean. There was a study done by the Australian Catholic University in Sydney that said that self-compassion can help protect against the symptoms that are associated with these perfectionistic tendencies. And that self-compassion is something that I have had to learn over time. I'm still learning. Like I said, I'm not there yet. And I don't know if I really ever will be. But I can get closer. And the way that I do this self-compassion is mindfulness, or meditation, if you want to think of it that way. Because guiding your thoughts in a specific direction, whether it's through meditation or other means, will help, or hurt, depending on what you do. And as I've said before, you put out what you take in. So if you're taking in and internalizing all these negative thoughts and energies, that is what you're going to express, either with your body language, with your vocal language, or with your facial expressions. So on that note, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You can get through this. And I love you. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in this week to True Stories of a Tryhard. You can find me on Instagram at ethan.t.hulen. That is Hulen. You can find me on Twitter, etphonehome. The O's are zeros, the E's are threes. You can find the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at True Stories Pod. The best way to get the word out about podcasts is via word of mouth and social media. So please, please, please share this with your friends. Share it on your social media. And if you post it in some way and tag me, you will get featured on the official podcast accounts. And please feel free to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. I would very much appreciate it. I'll be back with more stories next week. So until then, this is Ethan Hulen, signing off.